Swatches and samples are my love language. My office is full of them. I have cubbies and drawers and bookshelves just full of swatches and samples. I may even have a secret stash of Benjamin Moore paint swatches because my love of design does not end at stationery. But I have to keep these hidden because they make my husband's blood pressure rise. When the paint swatches come out, he knows a project is brewing and he needs to get out of the way. But anyway, back to the planners. Samples are essential to the product development and design process. Much like an interior designer or an interior design wannabe have swatches of paint and fabrics, I have swatches of faux leather material for covers, linings for the interior of pen pouches. I have paper samples in different thicknesses and colors, coil samples, ribbon samples, you name it. Any little piece of a planner, I have a sample of. I also keep samples of any product I've ever designed that we got a sample of, regardless of whether or not it's made it to market. And anytime I'm out shopping and I see a planner or a notebook that has an interesting design, maybe a cover material that I've never seen before, or it just catches my eye, I'll buy it and take it home and add it to my collection. I have quite a collection, and I like to consider myself a collector. We don't use the term hoarder around here. It's a little too harsh. I am a collector of the pretty planner things. If you feel me, hit the like button in solidarity. Hit the like button in solidarity. Okay, let's just skip that because apparently I can't say solidarity. Anyway. All of these samples serve as inspiration for the next product I'm gonna design, and I've built quite a great library of samples to choose from. In today's video, I wanna give you some insight on why sampling is so important. And if you follow my steps, you're gonna be well on your way to having a collection of samples just like mine. Let's dive in. Hey there, I'm Heather Harris, founder of Copper Bottom Design Co., a boutique product development agency that specializes in planner design and overseas manufacturing. Welcome if you're new here, and if you're returning, thank you so much for your support. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the boat on any new video that comes up next. So let's talk about sampling. Like I said, it's an essential part of the product design and development phase. It's not all about building a library. Sampling is involved in 3 parts of my production pipeline, meaning I sample products at 3 stages during my proprietary product development process. The first stage is at the very beginning, and this is when I'm working with a client that's developing a product that's new to them. It's nice to get an idea of what the product will look like before we get too far along in the design and development process. For example, right now I'm working on the redesign of a product that's currently on the market, but my client wants to see if we can get the production price down. She thinks that this product will be a much better seller if she can decrease the price point. One idea we had is to make the product smaller. So we need to test to see if this will be good. This is a memory keepsake kind of item, and so a smaller size could be great and get us the lower price point we want, but it could also affect the functionality of the product. If we decrease the size, are we still going to be able to fit all the photos and certificates that the end user is going to want to put in there? So we're working to order a sample so we can test this new size to determine whether or not this is a good idea. At this stage, I order what's called a dummy sample. This is a sample that has no printing on it. It's just blank white, but it uses the exact same materials you're going to use in your final product. The same interior paper with the same exact thickness, the same cover material, binding, everything. We want a clear picture on what that product is going to look like. Here's an example of a dummy sample. So this is just plain white. They did print a design on the end papers, and the interior paper is completely blank. So this is what I would consider a blank dummy sample. My manufacturer found this new coil that's an aluminum coil that's a little more flexible and lighter, thinner. She thought we might like it, but we don't like it. So I guess good thing we sampled. Anyway, the dummy sample is ordered so that we don't have to spend the time and money on printing our artwork on a product. We can just get that product so we can test the format, the size, all those things that are going to factor into your decision. Like I said, it gives you a clear picture of the look and feel of the product physically. Will this be really heavy or cumbersome to ship, or will it be easy to ship? Will it fit in your purse? And in the case of the memory keepsake book that I'm redesigning, will it fit all of the things that the customer is going to want to put into it? Once you have all these questions answered, you'll be able to determine whether or not this direction is a good way to go, and then continue on in your product design process. In the past, I've had clients that we ended up scrapping this product idea altogether. I was creating a wall calendar for somebody, and when we got the sample in, the thing was so huge, we thought, how the heck are we going to mail this to people? Her warehouse was like, this is going to cost way too much money to mail to your customers. And in the end, we just decided it wasn't a good idea. So we went back to the drawing board and we actually came up with a new format in which to make this calendar in. And I'm actually working on the design this week. A dummy sample is also good for testing the quality of the materials you've chosen. So do you like the cover material? Does it maybe pick up too much dirt? It gets linty. If it's a fabric cover, that's kind of a common problem where the fabric will pick up too much lint and dust and then it just looks ratty too quickly. Does the interior paper, if you do a pen test on it, does the ink bleed through the paper? Or does the ink show through on the opposite side of the paper? All of these things are things that you should test when you get your dummy sample in to make sure that everything's up to your standards and that your customers are going to have no complaints because the quality is so good. At this stage, you can also really rely on the expertise of your manufacturer. Along with the dummy sample, you can ask your manufacturer to send you maybe some cover materials that are a higher quality or at a better price point. They can send you swatches and samples of all of those. They can also send you samples of the stock color of what that material comes in, so you can save money by not having to print things custom. I have a bunch of samples over here. Like this is a stock swatch card of some interior lining material that would be good for a pencil case. So they can send you that in all those colors. Like I showed before, here's a bunch of faux leather material that we can choose from the stock colors of. It just saves so much cost on printing something custom. You can also request swatches of foil colors, ribbon colors, coil colors, new paper, you name it. Any little piece that's going to be involved in your planner, you can request swatch samples for. This will not only help you build your library of samples, but it will also educate you on the quality and pricing of certain materials. And in the end, this will help you make better decisions for your specific product. Another thing that the dummy samples are good for is checking the quality of craftsmanship with your manufacturer. For instance, that dummy sample we have here. You can check how the material folds from the outside cover to the inside and see that's pretty good quality. They're very tight on their fold over and it looks nice and trim and beautiful. This is something that a lot of not as skilled factories will miss, this tiny little detail. Their corners might look a little janky. You can also check to see if the cover material is adhered to the cover board properly. Is it smooth and flat, or are there air bubbles in there? These little details can make or break the success of a product. You'll be amazed by the reasons why customers return a product. They get so nitpicky, and rightly so. They're spending good money. You're priding yourself as a brand on having good quality. They're going to hold you to that standard, and then you likely should also hold your manufacturer to the same standard. The quality of craftsmanship is super important, but I do want to caution you that at the dummy sample phase, these samples are handmade. The quality of a dummy sample is not going to be the exact quality of the final production piece. The final production piece will have better quality because the factory is using machines to assist in the process. But even though the sample is handmade, like you saw, those corners are looking pretty good. And it's the factory's best interest to send you a really great high quality sample. This is how they're going to win your business. And if they're sending you a crappy sample, that's a red flag. Either they have poor quality of craftsmanship or they don't care about your business. And either way, you don't want to work with them. A poor quality product will be obvious. It'll be something that you can't look past. You can't say like, oh, I don't know, maybe this corner down here wasn't so perfect, but it is handmade and I know it'll be perfect in the production run. If it's something so glaringly obvious that you can't like chalk up to being handmade and you can't look past, trust your gut, move on, find another manufacturer. The third reason why you would order a dummy sample is to check the accuracy of your specs. Did you intend to have a ribbon bookmark in your sample or in your final product, but it doesn't appear in the sample? Well, that might be because you forgot to put it in your specs. Happens all the time. This sort of thing is going to directly affect the cost of your planner. Either adding the ribbon bookmarker or not, it might only be a few cents, but everything adds up, and in the end, you need an accurate price quote, especially if you're checking out manufacturers against one another and price is one of your deciding factors on who to go with. Another thing that often gets missed is the type of coil. So this could happen because maybe you don't know the proper terminology, or if there's been so much back and forth over email on which option to choose that everything's kind of lost in translation, or literally lost in translation because of the language barrier between you and China. So an example of this would be, most people just call ring bound items, they call them spirals. And it's because those spiral 5-star Mead notebooks that you used in high school, right? Everything was a spiral notebook. Well, a spiral coil is one that's one piece of metal wrapped around in a spiral. This is an example of a spiral coil. But the most common coil that's used today is actually called a twin wire O coil. And that's what this is. This is a Laurel Denise planner. It's the same kind of coil that a lot of planner brands use. Do you see how this coil is not connected? It's like this twin wire, but then it kind of clamps like a hand together. And that's how the coil is held together. So it's not spiral, it's a twin wire O. So there's twin wires in the shape of an O on this planner. If you end up with a sample with the wrong coil, it could just be because you used the wrong terminology, which is totally fine. You don't know until you know. That's something that's great to catch early on in the dummy sampling phase so you can have accurate pricing and know what you're getting into. The next stage of the production process when I order a sample is the pre-production phase. And this is what I call a PP sample, standing for pre-production sample. This is when the design is finished, everything is approved, we're ready to roll and start production. Sometimes the order will be placed already, sometimes not. It really kind of depends on the specific circumstances of the project we're working on. And sometimes I skip the dummy samples altogether and go straight to PP samples. But again, specific circumstances dictate which samples I'm going to order. The PP sample is much like the dummy sample in that it uses the same exact cover materials, interior materials, binding. It's made directly to the specs that you have requested, except the PP sample also includes printing of your artwork. So let's take this Laurel Denise planner again as an example. I order PP samples of this cover because it's a full color patterned cover. So we want to be able to see how the printing of the color is translated. Like, we might love something on screen, but we really want to see what the printed cover is going to look like in the final production. So when I say that these PP samples are printed with your artwork, typically the interior artwork is printed digitally, and maybe we'll print only the first 10 pages instead of the entire planner. Again, depends on the circumstances and what we're looking for, but we do that as a cost savings. But the covers we print as offset proofs, and this offset printing process is the final printing process that happens in your final production run and will show true color. Digital printing does not show true color. This could be a whole other topic for a whole other video. I'll have to mark that in my notes. But we order the offset cover proofs because we want to be able to see the true color and also the scale and size of the artwork. We might think that the scale of this pattern is great on screen, but once you get it in a physical sample, maybe not so much, and you might not be happy with the scale of it. So basically at the PP sample stage, we're checking the artwork and the printing quality to make sure we're happy with it before we print thousands of copies with our artwork and cross the point of no return. So it's just another safety net in my process where we specifically check the artwork for the quality of printing and the design layout. Another thing to check on your PP samples is the interior pages, and specifically the margin on the interior where your artwork comes up to the coil. A lot of times margins can get a little wonky, and when you think there's enough margin for the coil on screen and you actually see in the sample, like the artwork might be creeping too close to the coil, which can look funny. It ends up looking like a printing error, like things are too close to the coil, so you want a comfortable margin. So the PP sample is the perfect time to check to see if that artwork is creeping too close to the coil. The PP sample is a big deal. Sometimes you'll find that you need to rework your artwork, which is a huge bummer because then it's gonna affect your timeline because you have to go back and redesign, rework your artwork, and then do the sampling process all over again. But just imagine having not ordered that sample and getting a delivery of thousands of planners to have an error in it. This has happened to me. It stinks. And I'll tell you the story in a little bit. The final time I order samples in the production process is when production is finished. And I call these samples top samples. That stands for top of production samples. These samples are a way for you to give final approval on the production run before it gets shipped halfway around the world. This is the final safety net in my process. We don't want to go through the time and expense of shipping all these products if there's an error on them. At my request, it has become standard practice for all the vendors that I work with to send me and my client top samples and wait for our approval before shipping anything out. We need to ensure that everything is perfect and up to our standards before shipping out. This is our last chance to catch any errors. We rarely find errors at this stage of the process. They're few and far between, but with any production run, you can expect 1 to 3% of the quantity to have some type of error. This is normal. This is standard across the board. And what I mean by errors when I'm talking about this 1 to 3%, they are errors like maybe there's a page missing in the planner or a page is upside down or certain things are out of order. I recently was looking at some top samples and found this random pink sheet of paper in the planner that wasn't part of my product specs or my design. This must have happened when they were picking up the stacks of my printed pages, and they must have picked up this extra sheet of pink paper and then trimmed it and bound it into the final product. So it got trimmed with all the other pages. And something like this is super annoying, but if it got into the hands of a customer, the customer can just rip that piece of paper out and then their planner is 100% perfect. It doesn't affect the functionality of the planner. It might be a little bit embarrassing, but it's not a deal breaker. At this stage, we can also see maybe the logo on the foil stamped logo on the cover is a little crooked. That can happen. If that happens, I would turn around and ask the factory to send me photos of a lot of covers, like line out the planners on a big table or the floor and take photos so I can zoom in and look for myself to see if this is a widespread crooked logo or a one-off. And another kind of error that you can see is maybe the inconsistency in the print color from page to page. So this could happen because things are either printed in big batches or maybe they're printed in multiple batches and then they're collating those pages together from different print batches. The color could be a little off that way. It's not ideal, but not a deal breaker. I wouldn't reject an order for any of these errors, the pink sheet of paper or the color inconsistency. And like I said, I would ask to check the logos if it were a crooked logo situation. What we're looking for in the top samples is a widespread error that is in all of the planners or a majority of the planners in the production run. This would be something like you requested they use ivory paper, but they printed with white paper instead, or they used the wrong coil or coil color. Another instance would be maybe the tabs are out of order or the printing on the tabs is incorrect, which is what happened to me. One time I sent files to the printer for tabs and the printing on the tabs was facing in the wrong direction. This was very early on in my career and I didn't have those checks and balances and safety nets in place where I sampled along the way to be able to discover an error like this. I didn't notice it, my client didn't notice it, nobody noticed it until we got to our photo shoot. So here's a beautiful professional photo of my mistake. Lesson learned, and now we have many processes in place that will prevent this from ever happening again. Today, if I found this type of error in my top samples, I would put the project on hold, send the printer new design files, have them reprint the tabs, and then resend me new samples for approval. Again, annoying, definitely gonna hurt your timeline, but in the end, we want a perfectly printed product. So the top samples are really your last chance to catch a widespread error that's incorporated in every planner in the production run and is something that would render the product unsellable or unusable. So as you can see, samples are an essential part of the product development and design process. And it's key to sample a few times along the way. A good manufacturer should be willing to accommodate your request for samples if it's not already part of their process. But if they give you some pushback, that's a red flag, and I would suggest that you find a different manufacturer. You know what else is a red flag? A manufacturer that does not follow proper ethical guidelines. I'm talking sweatshops and child labor here. If you're curious about how to avoid working with a manufacturer like that, check out my last video where I talk about how to vet an ethical manufacturer in China. See you next time.